Welcome to the Quit Vaping Podcast, the podcast designed to make you a non-listener. In this show, I'm not going to scare you away from a life of vaping. What I am going to do is show you just how good your life can be without it. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the very first guest expert episode of the Quit Vaping Podcast. So a couple weeks ago, you guys had the first success story from Chase and Angela, and now we're having expert coaches and guests on to talk about our different frameworks and to bring on expert opinions in the industry. So today I have Patrick Fox, and Patrick and I both certified from the Life Coach School. He was a couple years before me. So as you're going to see today, we're going to have some similar frameworks in how we talk about alcohol and vaping. And Patrick is actually the host of the Rethink Alcohol Podcast. So he's been helping people all over the world change their relationship with alcohol for good. So as you're going to see today, there's going to be some similarities between vaping and alcohol. We're going to talk about the differences. We're going to talk about our individual frameworks for helping people. And we're just going to have a really, really good value-packed conversation about substances at large and where they fit into the biggest versions of our lives. So thank you guys for being here. You're going to get so much value from this episode. And if you want to reach out to Patrick or listen to his podcast after this episode, you can check out the links. And I put his website and also a link right to the Rethink Alcohol Podcast. I do want to apologize because my mic was cutting out a little bit. I had rough connection the day that we filmed, but it's still totally listenable, and there's just a little glitches in there, but they're not going to really mess with you that bad. Just want to acknowledge it. Enjoy the episode, guys.
Great to be back, and today I'm really thrilled to have a special guest on. His name is Andrew Cipriano, and he is the vaping guy. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation because we both went through the same coaching school. We met very briefly in Dallas over a year ago, which was fantastic. So I know that this conversation is really going to resonate with a lot of you because, you know, what we do in anything, we do in everything, right? And so often when we're stopping drinking, sometimes that addiction kind of manifests itself somewhere else, whether that's in sugar or more so now I'm hearing more about vaping, which I thought was really good time to bring Andrew onto the show. So welcome, dude.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, nice one, man. Well, I've introduced you as the vaping guy, but is there any way or anything that you'd like to say about yourself and what you do?
Not really. So I got into life coaching before I was in a psychiatric hospital working there. I was in a 4-year for psych. So I was going into the clinical world, and I found the Life Coach School where we got certified, and those tools just gave me a toolbox that actually allowed me to create the life I wanted. So I jumped over to life coaching, and for the last about 3 years, I've been owning my business, doing coaching, and I kind of fell into the vaping niche. I don't know if that's how it worked for you with alcohol, but we learned these tools in coaching that really can help people with like any problem, right? If you start to manage your thoughts and your emotions around things, any issue of your life will start to get better. It's inevitable. So I quit vaping using those tools, and I literally just stopped one day. I don't know what your experience is with alcohol, but I was taking the certification through the Life Coach School, and I was learning how to manage my thoughts and my emotions around things. And I just put down my last vape one day, super unceremoniously. After 9 years of nicotine addiction, I never looked back. So that's kind of my backstory with vaping. And I started a podcast about 1.5 years ago, literally called the Quit Vaping Podcast, and it took off. And once I realized, you know, how big of an issue this was, I kind of fell into this niche in coaching. That's why I guess I'm the Quit Vaping guy. But I like talking about anything psych. But yeah, that's my niche.
Ah, wicked. Nice one. Yeah, well, let's dive into it. I'd love to hear a lot more. So I think vaping's become or is going to be one of those next big challenges, right? Like with alcohol, I think it's obviously very widespread. It's very indoctrinated into our societies and cultures and things like that. And I think it's going to take a little while to start changing it. But we think about like the evolution of smoking cigarettes, and now that's changed to vaping. And I feel like, you know, I see so many kids, like teenagers, vaping and stuff now because it's all the flavors and it's cool and you can do it really quickly. You don't have to smoke a whole cigarette. You know, like when I was at school, you sneak in for a fag, you used to come back stinking, but you're vaping. I don't think you really smell that much afterwards and stuff. So I can see it's going to be more of a challenge in the future. Well, and now as well.
Yeah, well, I love that you call them fags. That's great. I'm sorry. So yes, the problem with vaping too is that stigma's gone. It's been predatorily marketed towards young kids. So if you look at, there's a documentary on Netflix called Big Vape, and it's all about how they created these nicotine sticks to be marketed kind of predatorily at younger people. So, I mean, they were never trying to switch people over to smokers, really. They were trying to get a whole new generation interested. And, you know, vapes are like they're biologically engineered to be so addictive. I don't know if you know what nicotine salts are, but pretty much what they've done with modern vapes, the disposable ones, most of them are using nicotine salts. And nicotine salts is where you take nicotine and then you take salts and you add them together. So you're mixing a base with an acid. So it kind of turns off your body's natural defense mechanism to gain a lot of nicotine. So you're able to inhale and really process a lot more nicotine than your body necessarily would if it wasn't like a little trick of chemistry, you know? So they're incredibly addictive. They actually enter your bloodstream faster than cigarettes. So I smoked cigarettes 2 years before I vaped. And I will tell you, vaping's, it's a hell more challenging to get off of because there's no stigma, there's no smell. I was vaping in class, in my college classes in the back of the room, like under a sweatshirt, I'd just be vaping. I was, even at work, I was like, where I was working at a psych hospital and I would sneak away and vape in the laundry room. So it's just, it's no wonder to me why it's an issue. And yeah, it's gonna keep getting that way unless we kind of like educate ourselves. So I've been trying to find ways to kind of get underneath it in a way that actually motivates people. One of the big ways that I can get under, and I don't know if you do this with your coaching with alcohol, but I talk about dopamine a lot and how when you're constantly abusing your dopamine, you're messing with motivation, your pleasure, your drive. And that usually for people that don't have health scares or anything, it kind of like just to let them know, you know, if you quit vaping, you're get so much of your natural desire back to do things that are a little bit more meaningful in your life than addiction. So.
Yeah, and I think, well, with alcohol especially, because you get such a flood of dopamine when you drink alcohol, and depending on how much you drank and for how long you drank and whether other substances were involved as well, you know, when people first stopped drinking, or when I first stopped drinking after a prolonged use of it, like I found it really hard to find a lot of joy in life. Like I was pretty miserable, to be quite honest, right? And because I just depleted, my brain had got used to. I'm doing a level here on the camera, but you know, it was really high. Like my brain had got used to this high level of dopamine. And of course, when you remove that, it's really, really low. So it's like you're trying to fill a swimming pool with the amount of water you put into a paddling pool.
Yeah. And you have to regulate the brain back out. But it's amazing because when you let yourself reset your dopamine, you start to have this motivation and this enjoyment for life that you can't have when you're constantly abusing your dopamine. So it really does happen that way. And like, I'm not anti-vaping. I'm not anti-alcohol or any substance. I just believe that you should be able to enjoy your life without them and that no substance should have control over you. So with nicotine, I mean, it's really hard to have a casual relationship, you know, for the previously mentioned ideas. It's very addictive. It's been to be very addictive. So, and with alcohol, I guess the idea behind me is like, you should be able to enjoy whatever event you're at without alcohol. And if you need alcohol to enjoy it, we want to look at the reasons why you're at that event and what's going on for you. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's dependency right there, right? If you need alcohol in order to experience something, then you've created a dependence on it, on something outside of yourself. So, yeah, like I say, alcohol is not good or bad. It is what it is. It's a drink in a bottle, but it's what's the relationship like that you've got with it, and the same for you with the vaping, right? If you're in class vaping under your jumper, like what does that tell you?
Right. Yeah, I did a lot of things that were not aligning with my values. And I know that you teach on values. And I was thinking about a couple of weeks ago after we had our first conversation. I'm like, it makes sense. Like, I think that's a good way to help people understand whether or not it's something they want to continue. It's hard when dopamine's involved, right? Because your brain's really sneaky. It's going to tell you all these reasons why it's not affecting you in a negative way. And it's going to be very compelling. So it's like, you know, we just want to lay it out neutrally. Let's look at the facts. What's actually happening? Do you have a dependency? Why can't you go a whole day without alcohol thought being in your mind all day at work and everything? It's like, what's going on for you in your life? And let's just get curious, compassionate, and honest with ourselves so that we can fix the problem if one exists. And if we don't have a problem, we can at least be truthful with ourselves about what we're doing and, you know, why we're doing it. So.
Yeah, such a great approach, and pretty much how I work as well. And I think when we can have more compassion and curiosity, it makes such a big difference. You know, the amount of coaching conversations I have, and guys are like, oh man, I drank yesterday and I feel like a dick and I wish I hadn't done this. I'm so stupid. And it's just, like, I get it. But at the same time, like that energy that you're now bringing to it is like, you're reinforcing that it's a problem and you're making it mean something about yourself. And so you just kind of make it more and more of a challenge in order for you to start rethinking how you want to be with it.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? When we just remove all the judgment we have on ourselves, we can actually ask ourselves questions and get to the reason why we're doing something from compassion and curiosity. It's like, okay, if you want to feel like shit and beat yourself up for a minute, go ahead. But like, now let's actually figure out, why were you in such a state yesterday that you couldn't sit down with a craving and you had to go, you know, against your own will to the store, buy a vape, and then feel like shit the whole day about it? Like, what actually happened for you? Like, let's just sit down. What was happening in your body? What were you thinking about? You know, did something happen at work? So you just can't do that work from beating yourself up. So I get that that's the natural human tendency, but we've got to unlearn that so we can actually get to the real situation. It's you know, when you make your substance use neutral, you're able to solve for it. But you have to make it not a problem first. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that?
No, 100%. It's fascinating actually, because I was coaching one of the guys I worked with not long ago, and he was saying how he had an urge come up the other day, and he just decided like he was going to have a drink, and then he went out for a walk, and he was like, okay, so I'm going to have a drink. Like he felt at peace with that decision, but then he started going to himself, well, why do I want to have a drink? Right? Like, well, what happens if I do have a drink? Like, how am I going to feel about that drink tomorrow? And all of a sudden, like which was amazing to see, because he just started coaching himself effectively. So he'd made it neutral. He kind of said he could do it and didn't make it a big deal, but then actually started going through all these different questions and recognizing, well, actually, no, this isn't what I want at all. Right? Turned out he was just hungry in the end.
Isn't that funny though? Because we don't know, you know, so much of the coaching I do on people, it's like, they're vaping over hunger or some kind of other emotion. I have no idea. And it's like, it's just really interesting to watch it happen. You know, when you actually get someone into their body one time to just like do a body scan and they feel an emotion they've never allowed themselves ever to even pay attention to. And then amazingly, like half of the desire to ever vape again goes away. It's like, once you have that knowledge and you actually get into your body, it's like, substances aren't bad, right? But the reason you want to use any substance is to change how you feel emotionally, whether you want to amplify a good or escape a bad. So once you bring awareness to that, you can really get to the issue and make more informed decisions from a neutral place.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I always use that expression, like you're either trying to enhance an experience or you're trying to escape an experience. I think that's when
and there's nothing wrong with either. Like, we're human beings, right? That's good. But if it's become to the point where alcohol or nicotine does have negative effects, or you feel out of control and you have this bad relationship, it's ruining the relationship with yourself, which any substance issue does. It's like, we want to figure out what's better. And, you know, a lot of people have no reason to stop drinking or stop vaping. So like a lot of the coaching that I do on the very start, it's like, let's envision a life that's actually so good if there wasn't a substance that you don't even need the substance. And they don't have to believe in that life, but like, can we at least play further? Like, you know, so many people, they're in jobs they hate, or they're in relationships they're not satisfied with. And like, are there people all the time? Like, you know, what would it actually look like if you had an amazing life to where you didn't need to escape it? Just a question. You don't have to not escape it, but just to help people frame that as an idea in their mind. I don't think people are taught to do that. I wasn't. I have a 4-year degree in psych. Like, I was never taught how to actually decide that what I wanted was possible and to spend time in that possibility for myself. And I know it's coach speak, but like, you know, dream about a life that's so good you don't need to be drunk to enjoy it. You know, that's the whole idea behind managing these substances, and then approach it from neutrality.
Yeah. And I think it can be uncomfortable as well sometimes, right? Like if you are drinking because you don't enjoy your relationship, or you just kind of feel like you're stuck in a dead end job or whatever it might be. Because if you stop drinking and you recognize like, well, this is how I actually feel, then you might have to do something about it, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the beautiful thing, right? It's like, I always say it's such a gift you give to yourself, because what I say about substances, and I really mean this with any substance, I think medication falls under this category, like food, sex, porn, is that substances allow you to tolerate a life you're not happy in. Binds you to that, right? It's like willful blindness. And I always tell people, especially brand new coaching clients who aren't really sure what they want, even if they're not vaping clients, like they just want to figure out their life path, cut out all dopamine hits for like 2 weeks. And I promise you, the emotions that come up, the bad and the good, will start to give you direction in your life. No one has a knowing issue what they want, right? We numb out what we want because we're scared that it's not possible or anything like that. So we stop listening to the natural emotions in our body that are always guiding us forward. So substances allow you to kind of blind yourself to what it is that you want and what it is that you actually want, that you're allowing yourself to tolerate, you know, being drunk or hopped up on a stimulant literally 24/7.
Yeah, exactly that. So when people come to you for vaping, like what are generally some of the reasons why?
I get everything, actually. You know, a lot of the health benefits, it just depends on the actual person and the age and their demographic. So I have to hit it at 1,000 different angles. Again, vaping is like, all the stigma's gone. No one thinks everyone's telling me it's healthier than cigarettes. So like now they have this belief that it's healthy, right? That's kind of like the mental swap that the company's made. So like, a lot of people don't actually come to me for health. I had one person that was coughing up blood, and that person, 23 years old, and even he wasn't coming for me for health. He's like, yeah, it's kind of sucks, but like, it's probably not the vaping, you know, like that wasn't even, so health doesn't really work. One of the biggest places I can find it to kind of get under people is if it's parents for their kids. So I target like moms, kids who are vaping, and the moms are usually doing it in secret because they're shameful and they want to help their kids. So like,
Yeah.
you know, you can always get a parent at their kid, right? Another place is like, but I've taught this, right? A lot of people listen to my podcast and I talk about the dopamine and how like, if you're allowing yourself to numb your dopamine, you're stopping yourself from what you really want and going after it. So like, you know, I get a lot of people on the whole big life, right? Life coaching ideas. It's like vaping stopping you from allowing yourself to become the person you want. Any addiction is, right? Like you said, any dependency makes you weak. Really, you're dependent on something else to be powerful. So I'm just thinking, what else? It's usually some kind of like the bigger idea for my life, or I want to do it for someone else.
No, or even that, when somebody else is asking you to do it, like I find that with drinking, sometimes guys are doing it because someone else wants them to do it, but it's not until they fully own that actually this is the decision, the path choice that they want to make, that they actually start seeing the results, the change happen.
Yeah, you have to own that, right? I'm coaching somebody right now and I've been coaching for 8 weeks. She got a 10-week package and we're on week 8. She's the only person I've ever coached who isn't quit yet by this time. And the whole like last 3 weeks, we've been trying to figure out a vision for her life that's better than vaping. And she is very resistant to doing that. So it makes sense to me. It's like, if you can't figure out a life that's better without alcohol or whatever the substance is, you're going to keep using it, right? You're unwilling to let go of those beliefs. It doesn't mean that there's not a one possible for you. It's just, there's some part of you that's like scared to envision that, or, you know, she's got a lot right now around releasing vaping. So we're just doing a lot of coaching on that, but it's like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's identity, isn't it? I think, or that's what comes up for me is when I was drinking and using and stuff, like that's who I was. Like that's how I identified with myself. So the prospect of not having that is like, well, who am I? Right. So it was really difficult to even see a life beyond that. And it took a little while. And I remember a couple of months into not drinking and feeling really low and crappy, that's when life coaching came back into my life. And I was like, look, here's this thing, this skill that I learned years ago. I want to get back into it. And all of a sudden, like we talk about dopamine, like I started, all of that dopamine started going back into coaching, started going learning about business and all of those things. So when I work with guys, I think it's really important to have a project or something to work on alongside of not drinking, because it just gives you a little bit of a different focus at the same time. And look, it doesn't mean you're going to feel masses of joy all the time with it, but it does give you something else to focus on.
Yeah, that's good. Actually, I think that I've inadvertently found that with targeting moms who want their kids to quit. That's their project, right?
Yeah.
Their kid, to help them. So, I was going to say something. So I'm just learning how to market, really. I've just been kind of like, when you're first getting in, you're just kind of throwing shit out and like whatever. So the whole idea is like with marketing is you want to hit both angles towards pleasure, which coaches always do. What's the big version of your pleasurable? What's going to be better about your life? And then you also kind of want to market away from pain. So like I'm trying to figure out how to do that right now, because my mind as an entrepreneur and a coach is like always towards pleasure, right? I want you to have the biggest version of your life, but I'm trying to figure out how to market away from pain too. So like you're in shame, you have a lack of freedom is the big one, I think, to get people to want to quit. Like, listen, if you're vaping, I don't care. Like you have a lack of freedom, right? You're stopping yourself. A lot of the people that coach one-on-one with me, they're business owners. And my shtick is like, you literally started a business to have as much freedom as you possibly could in life, literally dependent on a stick of nicotine, and you're feeling bad about it. Like why would you know what I mean? It's the ultimate lack of freedom is addiction. So what is the point of even being an entrepreneur? Just go get a 9-to-5 job. I kind of just like hit him at that angle, and it really gets him thinking. It's like, so I'm learning how to go also pain with my marketing, but you have to ultimately find your own eclectic mix of reasons. The big reason why I quit, honestly, was I don't believe that life coaches can have addictions. I don't think you can be an effective life coach if you have an addiction.
Yeah. That resonates, man. Like, I definitely think I don't think by any means we have to be perfect, but I think that was for me is why when I first started coaching and I was still drinking and using, like it just was not very congruent. I just like, who am I to coach someone on their life when I'm going out every weekend and getting absolutely annihilated? Like it just didn't feel good. Like you mentioned values earlier, like that just wasn't in alignment with my values.
Exactly. So I use the term carefully. I am by very no means perfect whatsoever. Like I still drink alcohol. Actually, I haven't done the work on that. I don't want to yet. Honestly, I'm not there. But my definition of addiction is like you feel out of control of it in some area. Was that you?
Yeah, no, my dog.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay. Yeah. So I don't feel out of control with the alcohol though. I haven't hit the point. I'll go out, I plan for it. I'm going out this weekend, I'm going to have some drinks. I do it. It's never out of control. It never creates results I don't want in my life. And it's nothing that I feel like is out of integrity with my messaging. But vaping was like, there was shame and guilt around it and a sense of powerless and control, lack of control. So I'm like, this is something I need to clean up. Right. So I just don't think any substance have any of that grip on you at all. And with vaping, I did. So that's why that one was like, this isn't going to fly with life coaching if I'm vaping.
Yeah. I think that's a great definition of addiction, right? Like addictions, when you carry on doing something, even though you know that it's going to cause negative consequences or is causing negative consequences in your life.
Yeah. Do you know Andrew Huberman?
Yeah.
He has a quote that addiction is the progressive blurring of the things that bring you pleasure. And I like teaching that too, because it's like, it's all about dopamine, right? If I'm getting out, I mean, everybody knows it who's drinking, right? Like, especially if it's something that is impulsive, it's like, this is the thing I'm looking forward to the most in my life. So if you take that out, it's like, oh my God. And you have that fear around it. It's like, you might want to look into that, right? If there's any negative emotion from removing the substance, that's a good indication that you might want to do some work on the substance and really make sure you're coming at it from a clean place. I have no negative emotion on alcohol. I could drop it tomorrow. And it's not like there's no grip, at all. And I've done it actually. I would say once a year for 3 months, I take out alcohol just to make sure I'm good. You know what I mean? I'm like, I want to make sure this isn't anything negative, and I'll reintroduce it casually as I see fit. But with vape, and even with vaping, since I've done the coaching, like I'll hit a vape every once in a while at the party. It has no concern whatsoever I'm ever going to get addicted to it. But even that, it's like, I feel kind of out of integrity with that. So even recently, I'm like, I should probably be completely abstinent from this if I want to coach on it. So, but it's interesting, my messaging is changing, and I'm totally open to change and have those conversations. I'm never coming at it from like a black and white line in the sand. And I think it should be everyone's decision to make for their own substance use and how much and which ones they're using. And I don't think they're inherently wrong to use or anything like that, or that you're using a substance means you have inherent lack of control in life. So.
Yeah, agreed. The minute we start putting morality on these things, like that's when we start getting ourselves in trouble, because then we start making it mean things about ourselves. And of course, that never feels good, which we touched upon earlier. So, look, you mentioned earlier around emotions, right? Like, now, this is a conversation I always like having, particularly as majority of the people who listen to this podcast are men. And so, not all guys are aware that they're even having emotions, right? So when you're working with someone and they perhaps don't have that emotional intelligence, let's say, what are some of the things that you do to help people start realizing that they are feeling?
Yeah, I get that. So I'm a gay man. So a lot of people think I'm like super like flighty with my emotions and shit. I'm not like that at all. I'm very rational. I like to be very rational with the tools I teach. And emotion is what we've been taught. And I agree with this. It's just a vibration in your body. It doesn't have to be like girly or anything or like mystical. It's literally just an experience in your body. And that experience is driving your action. That's all it is. We don't have to do anything with like divine feminine energy or anything like that. So it's like, just if you want to, if you're taking any action in your life that feels compulsive, that's kind of pulling you towards it, just check in and ask yourself, what's going on in my body like 3 times a day for like 2 weeks? And you're doing emotional work. And you don't even have to call it emotional work if you don't want. It's just about like taking a deep breath and just focusing your attention down on your body, and you'll start to pay attention and feel things. Like when I first started doing this work, especially when I was vaping, I didn't realize that I was experiencing anxiety like 80% of the time. And once I remember the day I did this. I sat down in a chair after, our coach was like, feel your emotions, do this work, the now feeling worksheet. And I'm like, whatever, I'm going to do it, So I sat down in a chair, I took a deep breath, and I just let myself be there for like 5 minutes. And like 2 minutes in, I felt this pounding in my chest come in, and it was just like pervasive. And it was the first time in my life I've ever noticed that. I had no idea what anxiety was. I thought I did. Right. And it was really just awakening moment for me. And I started doing that regularly because I'm like, this is pretty interesting, So I realized after doing that for like a month, I'm like, I'm anxious all the time. And then I started noticing that before I was vaping, I was very anxious. And then afterwards, what was interesting, because it's a stimulant, it would actually amplify that emotion in my body. I had never done this work before. I had no idea there was anything going on in my body. So that's all emotional work has to be. You can get woo-woo, and you can get coaches who are like, we're going to take you back to your childhood and experience the womb. And but you don't have to do that. There's not a bad thing with that, but just breathe into your body and do it on purpose. And you'll start to develop this relationship with your body that you've never had before. And you can call it emotional work. You can call it connection. You can call it like whatever the fuck you want that makes it acceptable for you to do in your mind,
Yeah, so many great points in there, right? Like one, like what are your associations to emotions? And like you said, like do you see them as girly or whatever? And so that's a good point to check in with, just to kind of see if there's any beliefs that you have about emotions or feelings, for example. And I also love that idea of it. I call it something similar, like the daily check-in, right? Like just like what's happening in my body, like what am I noticing? And it could be as simple as like, oh, I can feel my heart beating or my shoulders are aching. Well, all of a sudden you've just started building up this emotional vocabulary, whether you
Mhm.
recognize it or not.
It's really important too, like because you're not always feeling a strong emotion, but when you are doing this work, it just gives you so much control back. I always say it's not a control issue. I don't think that you're never out of control if you're drinking or vaping. That's never true. It's that we're not aware of what's going on in our body, and with awareness comes power to change, right? So if you can bring awareness back to your body and your thoughts and your mind, that's all this work is. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It's like going to the gym, but for your mind and your body, the inside of your body. Just constantly do this work and you'll have so much more control over your life. And you'll no longer feel like out of control of anything, really. I don't even have that story in my mind anymore that I'm out of control. Even when I still overeat, by the way, and I still drink sometimes more than I expected I was to. It's never the story in my head that I was out of control. I was experiencing emotion. I pretty much could pinpoint the emotions and I wanted to change them. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's a totally different story than I don't know why I'm drinking, or I have no idea why I'm vaping. There's a zombie in my body when I was going to the vape store and I have no idea. And, so it's just about taking control.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's just that it's helpless, isn't it? Because when you're thinking those kinds of thoughts, you feel helpless. You feel like it is outside of your control, or it's happening to you. And of course, for as long as you believe that, and I did that for a long time, well, then there's nothing you can do about it, right? Allegedly, to your mind.
Yeah. And I want to give you credit, like that when you're in that spot and you don't have this work, that's very real to you. Like I vaped for 7 years because I smoked cigarettes for 2. I didn't feel in control. I really didn't. It wasn't until I found out that I could actually, that my thoughts were eventually leading to me vaping, my emotions and my thoughts. And I actually did this and brought awareness again to my life. It's the awareness that allowed me to have that perceived control back in my life. So I know where people are at when they're drinking and they're smoking. And I totally empathize with them. I've been there, right? But I also know that if we do this work, you look back and you just kind of laugh. You know what I mean? You're like, wow, I can't believe I was thinking and feeling those things, reacting in that way, So it's just, this work puts you on an entirely different brainwave. It's so cool. Like, and again, it doesn't mean that you're not human. I still do shit all the time where I'm like, and I do shit like all the time, but it's a very different feel when you know that you're in control rather than feeling out of control altogether. So.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, no, that you're right. Like it does come with awareness. It can feel automatic in a sense, but once you actually understand like those thought processes and why they're happening, well, that's where you create more autonomy, more choice for yourself. It's funny because in last week's episode of the podcast, I talk about the 3 stages of sobriety, and really you could replace that word sobriety for stopping vaping or any other kind of substance, right? And it's the first stage is you have the awakening. And so that's where you recognize, like, actually, what's going on here? This isn't serving me. Like, I'm doing things that I don't want to be doing and all of that stuff. But then you go through the messy middle. And that's the bit where you're trying to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. You get some wins along the way, but then something happens and you fail and then you beat yourself up for it. And then you like go through that journey, that process. And then you get to that, the other side, I call it, right? And that's that point where you just alluded to, is where you look back and you go, like, literally, it's disbelief almost. It's like, I can't believe that's the way that I used to behave. Or I can't believe those are some of the things that I used to do. And that's where your mindset is just completely flipped about how you think about what you've done or did.
Yeah. And it's important too, like, you're not better or worse. Is so much lighter. You know what I mean? I almost got fired from the psych hospital I worked at. I was vaping in a patient room. I did the graveyard shift and I couldn't, in a psych hospital, you can't really leave other staff alone because it's dangerous. So like, I'm just vaping in patient rooms. One of them comes up to the front desk and he says something. He like totally saw me. I almost got fired. And like, I look back and I'm like, I had so much shame and guilt at the time because I genuinely felt out of control, right? Like now I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Like, it's just so much lighter when you get to the other side. It's so worth it. Nothing else is worth it as much as this work. I really believe that. I mean, my life is so different than it was a couple of years ago when I felt out of control of this stuff. It's crazy. And again, like, I'm not a millionaire. Like, I'm not better than anybody else. Like, I'm sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment and I have about the same level of income that I did a couple of years ago, but just everything about my life is so much better inside of me mentally and in my emotions that I don't care. The external results don't even matter. I just feel so much better all the time.
Nice, man. Yeah. Well, that's mental health, isn't it? Mental and emotional health, just taking care of it all. Amazing. So, Andrew, anything else that you'd like to offer any of our guests listening today, whether it's around addiction or mental, physical, emotional health, something else?
Yeah, I think I like the rational, just so people know like what this work is we have two brains, right? I like to just say, I don't know how it's always taught in ways. I call it the animal brain, the human brain, right? Everybody knows the lizard brain, right? When you're out of control and you feel like you don't have control, you don't know what's going on, you have no idea what's happening in your mind, your body. I call that the animal brain, right? This whole work is all about turning on this. I'm pointing at the front of my brain, the prefrontal cortex. It's like the human part of our brain. It's all about learning how to turn that on and activate that more often than the animal brain. When you can do that, you can have an amazing life, and you can still run after dopamine hits sometimes and like satisfy the animal desire in you to go, whatever it is, porn, alcohol. And it's just different. You have so much control. So what we're effectively doing in coaching is teaching you how to use the part of your brain that makes you human, that can actually override all the emotional stuff. Like imagine a dog, right? A dog's just going to eat until it throws up, and it's going to always be seeking dopamine. And so that's kind of what our brain's doing until we learn this work and we practice it out. So if you want like a rational explanation, that's all we're doing. Training the prefrontal cortex, training it over and over again to take charge. And that's all. It doesn't make you better or worse. It doesn't make you more worthy. It's just a skill set you learn. It's completely neutral, whether you learn or not. But I promise you that when you learn the skill set, your life gets a lot better on every measurable dimension. So hopefully that helps.
No, I love that. I think it's so important. Like if we can have even if it's just the most basic understanding of how our brain operates and how substance operate when we put them into our body and how that interacts with our brain and the dopamine, which made that sound really complicated. It's not, but if we could just have like a real simple understanding of ourselves and the brain, it does help to remove all of that judgment and shame, because you go, okay, so this is what to expect. This is why it's happening. Like, how can I make a different choice around that next time?
Yeah. There should be no judgment. I want watermelon right now. I don't need it. I want it. It's in my fridge. I know it's there. I'm like, dopamine, water. I love watermelon. It's my favorite thing in the world. I want to overeat most days. I'm actually all the time I want to overeat. Like that part of your brain's always going to be there. I just don't do it now because I can override it. Right? So there's no reason to have judgment and shame. And these tools are taught. That's why we exist. Like I was in a therapy course and degree, and I opted out of that because that shit wasn't being taught to me there. So like, it's not your fault you haven't learned it, but if you're in this podcast, it's a beautiful place to enter. I always say it's a beautiful thing you have a substance problem and that you found this work, because somewhere along the line you find this work anyways, whether it's with vaping or a divorce that you need help with, or you snap and you end up going to therapy or something. So, you're in the right thought. I always believe that. And if you're here and you're having a problem with substances, this is the work you need to bring you out of it. So be happy you had the problem, that you found this, so.
Yeah, love that. Love that. All right, dude. Well, listen, there's a question that I like to ask all my guests when they come on, and that's, what does it mean to be radically human?
I love that. So he's like, did you get the email? It was in the email. No, but I'm like, I can just answer this right off the cuff. I really think radically human is owning the entire human experience, right? Like even like still striving for the best version of yourself, but also letting yourself be a mess sometimes. Like I'm going to music festivals at the end of the month. Yes. And I'm so okay with that. And I'm going to go back home and I'm going to do this work and embody the shit out of it and embody it there. And I just think that you can have, when you live completely authentically and you're not bullshitting anyone, but you're still trying to be a good person and learn how to improve yourself, and still allow for this part of you that doesn't want that. That's like the ego that just wants to get like, I don't want to say drunk because this is the podcast run, right? But like they just want to avoid and do the animal dopamine stuff. And then you can also, you can be both. I think that's how I'd answer that. Radically human is allowing yourself to have the whole human experience, the fun, the discipline, and just be curious and compassionate the whole way through. I think that's the best way I could describe that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, man. Listen, I've loved this conversation. I think you've given tons of great insight, and like the compassion coming through you in everything you're saying is immense. And it's been really good.